Let's talk about the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. In this three-part series, we're going to talk about the big, the beautiful, and the brutal elements of this law. So let's get started. So the biggest part of this law is actually the extension of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and the fact that all of the rates are not only going to stay the same and be made permanent, but the brackets themselves are going to stay the size that they are. So let's take a look at a typical persona, a couple that's making $200,000 a year working here in the United States. Assuming nothing changes other than that $200,000 a year, under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which now under the One Big Beautiful Bill has been made permanent, their first probably $23,000 is taxed at 10%. Between $23,000 and $96,000, they're paying 12% tax. And the final $96,000 to $200,000, they're being taxed at 22%. If we were to revert to the previous law, now they're no longer in those brackets. Look at how the brackets change. They actually end up hitting 4 brackets. The first one's 10%. The second one jumps them to 15. The third one goes to 25. And then they actually end up hitting a 4th bracket for the last roughly, $50,000. And that bracket's actually the 28% bracket. So they went from 10, 12, 22 to 10, 15, 25, 28. Big deal. That's a huge deal, right? And that is something that few people are talking about, but that is probably the biggest element of this law that took a lot of uncertainty off the table. Now, we work in the stock market, and in the stock market hates uncertainty. And I want you to know we've had this kind of cloud over us when we've been thinking about the future as to whether we were going to revert back to the old tax system or whether the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act would be made permanent. The fact that this has been made permanent now reduces the uncertainty, which is why you've seen stocks perform quite well after the passage of this bill. Making some of these taxes and tax cuts permanent is a huge sense of relief for most investors. Number 2, the standard deduction was made massive. Under this new bill, a family would get a standard deduction of $31,500, and a single individual, it would be $15,750. If this law didn't pass, the standard deduction would have gone down to $12,700 for a family, $6,350 for an individual. Under the previous law, people were forced to kind of try to figure out other ways to maybe try to get some deductions through itemizing on their taxes. You try to figure out, can I get my mortgage deduction? Can I try to itemize, state and local taxes? What about things like charitable contributions or healthcare expenses? It creates a lot of extra complexity. Being able to just have the standard deduction and say, oh, here's my standard deduction, I'm lowering my income by that amount, is a big deal for a lot of families. Not only does it reduce their complexity massively, but it saves them a lot of money. And again, think about that family making $200,000. If they're making $200,000 after that standard deduction, they're down to about $168,000, give or take, right? Under the old law, that same family making $200,000 would be down to about $188,000. So the amount of taxable income that you have is vastly different under the two regimes. Number 3, if you're a business owner, there is a huge deal in this law for you. As a business owner, in many cases, you need to do capital improvement projects. And capital improvement projects are costly, right? We're going to build a new addition onto our building so that we can service some more customers, right? Let's say that addition costs $100,000 and the useful life of that addition is about 10 years. Under the old law, we would have had to deduct that expense over a 10-year period. So now, $100,000 divided by $10,000 per year is the depreciation expense of that office build out. The only problem is I still had to pay the $100,000 right now to build that office. Under the new One Big Beautiful Bill Act, we can deduct the full $100,000 in the year that we spent it. That is massive. It's probably the biggest part of this law that's not really talked about on YouTube or really anywhere for that matter. And for a lot of people, you need to really think about that because that actually is also made retroactive to the beginning of this year. So even if, let's say you did a build out, right? You can now take that expense and expense it all in this year, which means your taxes are going to go down massively. So those are the 3 big elements of this law. Also, stay tuned for our video number 2, which is going to talk about the beautiful elements of this law. There are many things that are beautiful that are going to make things simpler, a lot easier to do. Make sure you like and subscribe and then hit that notifications icon so that you can see when we drop new videos, which is usually every Wednesday. Stay tuned for all those videos. We'll see you next time.